Joints are where two bone articulations come together at a linkage point connected by ligaments, tendons, and muscles to allow mobility to a certain degree. The degree of mobility is determined by the type of joint it is. Synovial joints, which I will be talking about in particular, are the most commonly injured joints among people of all ages. What makes one joint more susceptible to injury than another, and how can we prevent injuries to those vulnerable joints? As I just mentioned, joints are the point at which movement occurs. So if they're all mobile, why are some more susceptible to injury than others? As stated in the Manual of Structural Kinesiology, the more mobile a joint is, the more susceptible to an injury it becomes. For example, what would you suspect to be more susceptible to injury, an elbow joint or a shoulder joint? Right here I have an illustration of both. The hinge joint above my finger is the elbow joint, and the one directly above the hinge joint is the ball and socket joint, which is the shoulder. The reason the shoulder is more susceptible to injury as a ball and socket joint is because it is much more complex than the hinge joint. Whereas the hinge, like a door, moves in two directions, it flexes and extends, whereas the shoulder, which is a ball and socket, moves in all three planes, which includes flexion, extension, adduction and abduction, and upward and downward rotations. So synovial joints are also referred to as ball and socket joints, and they include the shoulder and the hip. The ball and socket joint is the most mobile joint in the body, and is termed as a multi-axial joint, which means having multiple axes of moving through planes. Synovial joints move through all three planes, which is their mobility is why they have so many disorders, as well as diseases such as inflammations like arthritis linked to them. There are precautions one can take to increase the durability of a joint. And here I have another illustration of a synovial joint, which is the shoulder girdle. As you can see, it's a much more complex linkage point than that of a hinge, whereas the shoulder, the head of the humerus, is set in a very small process to where it can rotate in and around, versus like the hip is the same concept, it's just a much better fit per se than the shoulder, which is why there's a lot more injuries that occur with the shoulder. Precautions that can be taken for the durability or longevity of a joint is being active in general. Just movement and using the joint makes the joint more durable, to say. Synovial joints, they release synovial fluid, which lubricates the joint in a sense, which it helps movement, it helps it glide better. So the more you move it, the better the blood flow to it is, and the more synovial fluid can be released at that point when it is in use. A quote from Rossi is, "Joint structures need optimal motion and stress to maintain proper function. Moreover, proper cartilage and joint nutrition are required for proper joint function. Therefore, it is important to have a synovial fluid maintain nourishment to the joint surfaces and the cartilage in an effort to maintain the integrity of the joint. Since joints are not well supplied by blood flow, it is important that movement and weight bearing is encouraged to promote fluid flow between joint surfaces and discs, such as the meniscus of the knee, for example. Another way to help the durability of a joint is light resistance training to strengthen the muscles that encompass that joint. So stronger muscles around the joint make for a tighter joint and a more functional joint. So as mentioned, although all joints are similar in concept, providing a point for mobility as well as linkage between bones, some are more vulnerable to injuries than others. A key factor is the mobility of that joint. As I mentioned, synovial joints have much more mobility in all three planes of motion versus hinge joints or other joints throughout the body. So it's important to strengthen that joint by using it, being functional and active to prevent injury because they are very vulnerable to injury. Thank you.